What is up, you guys? Teller checking in for UFC Vegas 71. We got a top 5 heavyweight showdown between Sergei Pavlovich and Curtis Blaydes. Somewhat of a striker versus grappling type of affair. Even though you guys know the way things are today, it's never really the case. Obviously, Curtis Blaydes can throw down on the feet as well. He's shown major development with his striking. And Sergei Pavlovich, he still has a lot to show us. And a lot of his fights, the fights end so quickly, we really haven't been able to see what he's completely about. So I'm excited for this matchup. Again, when you have a top 5 heavyweight showdown, you guys know we're talking fireworks. Other than that, there's definitely some exciting fights scattered throughout the card. I want to apologize for not giving you guys a recap of UFC Kansas City. I've been on the road. I finally just made it back to the lab here. As some of you guys know, Greek Easter was this past weekend. So a little bit different than the regular Easter. I was doing some traveling, some family type stuff, and I just got back to the lab. I've been doing research on these fights, and I want to jump right into this upcoming weekend's card. UFC Kansas City was not a good one, as you guys know. Overall, with the picks, it was a wild one for me. We did hit our biggest play that we attacked, but it was a hefty minus 225 line on Rafa Garcia, but 6 units cashes on him. The other 2 plays that we went after, of course, the free play didn't hit as well, but we're still 5-2 there, and I will bounce back with the big victory for this card. I'll give you guys a free play for this upcoming fight card. And then besides Bruno Brazil not cashing there, unfortunately, Tanner Bozier was not able to push that fight to the later rounds where I really felt he could have showcased that he had the better gas tank and whatnot, but he gets clipped by Ian Cutelaba, and it is what it is. He got finished up. So really don't want to go on too much about that fight card. I'm about the future right now. I'm looking to attack this UFC Vegas 71 fight card. Please catch me on all my social media, on Instagram at MMA Fortune Teller _, on Twitter at the MMA Teller. Please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel. And if you guys are looking to sign up for a new sports book, if you guys are looking to join Bovada.lv, you guys know you can reach out to me and I will give you my referral link. You'll get an added bonus to your account. And besides that, I'm going to give you guys an entire month of my official picks for free. You guys heard that right. I'm giving you guys an entire month, and I guarantee you guys you will profit very well from my picks. If not, I'll do you right one way or another. I got something lined up for you guys. So I promise you, though, this next coming month, over the next 4 weeks, I see some spots that I really like. It's a great time to take advantage of that if you're looking for a new sports book. All right, guys, let's jump into the first fight.
Welcome to the show, this the MMA Fortune Teller. Yeah.
The MMA Fortune Teller.
The teller.
Kicking the card off, we have a bantamweight matchup between the Ultimate Fighter finalist Brady Hiestand taking on Danaa Batgerel, a fighter that we know is very dangerous on the feet. He has shown that he carries some serious power. Now, he hasn't had his hand raised in his last 2 fights. We remember he got knocked out by Chris Gutierrez, and then in this bounce-back fight, took another L against the talented striker in Hyung Ho Kong. So Danaa, very hungry here. He's 33 years old, and the time is now, without a doubt. There's no room to take a loss here. You can potentially say this is a do-or-die type of fight. Maybe not completely, but he doesn't want to be in the position taking 3 losses in a row. While on the other hand, Brady's coming in off a victory. In fact, in a fight where we had an official play on him, he used his grappling very much so in that fight against Fernie Garcia. But he's still so young at 23 years old that even if he takes an L here, we know that he's still learning and he's sharpening up his skills. And the future is pretty promising for him, in my opinion. I think that he will be a very much more complete fighter, obviously, when he's 28 years old. And I think he's a fighter that will be in the UFC around that time. I think that he has that type of potential. But right now, we're talking about a matchup between a fighter that is, like I said, 33 years old. He's a much more primed fighter. I think he is the much more dangerous fighter. He's the better striker here. Brady has not really impressed me with his skills on the feet. We see that, first off, he's only putting out a ratio of 2.83 significant strikes landed per minute, so he's not really doing anything on the feet. And we saw that in the Fernie fight. Again, then these numbers are just based off the 2 fights that he's had in the UFC. I don't believe they were based off his Ultimate Fighter fights. It would be the finale fight and then his UFC debut. But still, these numbers are pretty true. He hasn't really shown anything throughout his career on the feet that really stands out that much. It's the grappling that he has gone to get the majority of his wins. So take note that he's also absorbing almost double the amount of shots that he's putting out there, almost double, not quite. While on the other hand, Danaa is putting out a ratio of 6.22 significant strikes landed per minute, a very high volume, and we already talked about how dangerous he is there. So you have that high volume being thrown towards Brady's way, and you know he's willing to take one. To give one. And I actually think that his chin is pretty solid. You know, that shot that he was hit by Chris Gutierrez with was a significant shot. Overall, though, he can eat a shot and to give one back. And I think that Brady does not want to play that game whatsoever. So I'm going to say that this fight is going to come down to the fact Brady lock up those takedowns and steal some rounds, or maybe try to really do something down on the mat, maybe try to finish the fight there. You know, Danaa Batgerel has shown to have had a 67% takedown defensive rate in the UFC. He's been pretty decent in that department there. So you talk about all these numbers, and it definitely points me towards Danaa Batgerel's way. But even if you want to take a step away from the numbers and just kind of analyze this fight based on the tape and just what we know of these two fighters, I think that this is a fight that leans towards Danaa's way. I think that he can hurt Brady on the feet. The showing that Brady had in his UFC debut against Fernie Garcia was not that impressive. Fernie was getting the better of him on the feet, and he really needed to get those takedowns in that fight to steal that match there. And again, nothing but props towards Brady's way. He came through for me on that official play, but I was definitely pretty anxious watching that fight, and it was a close one. I will be taking Danaa to get the job done here. I'm going to be siding with him. We'll take a look at the betting line right now. We're going to take a look at best fight odds and see the live line here from a multitude of sports books. And Hiestand is going to be the dog through all these major sports books, DraftKings, BetMGM, all of them. We're seeing a line of a plus 115 underdog line pretty consistently, with the comeback on Danaa around minus 140. I think that line's pretty accurate, but I lean towards Danaa's way even then. Brady is going to have to show some improvement on the feet, and he's going to have to really try to sneak those takedowns, and he can't telegraph them. He's going to have some success on the feet to potentially sneak in those takedowns, because otherwise they're going to be telegraphed. Dana's going to be seeing them coming from a mile away, and I think he's going to have a good amount of success stuffing them and hurting Brady there. That's how I see that fight going down. In the flyweight division, we got a matchup between two Brazilians here. Priscila Cachoeira taking on Karine Silva. We know that Priscila Cachoeira has carved out a little bit of a name in the game for herself, getting these knockouts over in WMMA. We don't really typically see them the way that she goes out there and does them. So obviously she has gained a lot of respect. And when you think about the way she came into the UFC, getting beat down by Valentina Shevchenko, she seemed to just be a complete wash of a fighter. And that really hasn't been the case throughout her career. She's been a fun fighter to watch. A lot of big knockouts on her resume. If you want to talk about a few of them real quick, knocking out Ariane Lipski in her last fight. Back in the day, knockouts over Gina Mazzani, the knockout over Shayna Dobson. Shout out to Shayna Dobson for sliding in my DMs. Shayna's a cool chick. And those are some of the big knockouts we're talking about. So maybe not an overwhelming list, but she's had 3 big time knockouts in the UFC, which is a lot more than your average, fighter can say in women's mixed martial arts right now in the UFC or wherever, whatever promotion you want to talk about. So just understand that she definitely does have power, but there's something we got to talk about. She does take a lot of damage in her fights as well. She's a fighter that is hit on at 7.85 significant strikes absorbed per minute. That's an extremely high stat. And we have seen that throughout her career, right? She's looking to eat a bunch of shots and try to land that big shot. But what happens if she doesn't get that knockout? And I don't really think that you should be banking on any women's fighter to get that knockout, while in the meantime eating the amount of shots that she takes if it goes to the judges' scorecard. So that's something to take note of. Karine Silva has shown to be a tough fighter. I don't know if she's going to be the type of fighter that just gets put out like that. I think that Karine is going to be landing on her on the feet as well. I was very impressed with her UFC debut, where she was very, very patient on the feet before tagging Poliana Botello with that big shot, and then going right down to the mat, and then setting up that Darce choke. I believe it was a Darce choke that she hit her with. It was a Darce choke, and Poliana was quick to tap there. And you know what? It was impressive. And the way that I see this fight taking place is I think that Priscila will be looking for that big shot on the feet. I think that Priscila will have some success, while in the meantime, she'll be eating a lot of shots. But I think that Karine has the potential to get this fight down to the mat at one point in time. And I think that she is a sub threat. She's a very well-rounded fighter. She has some serious submission skills as well. So maybe we see that from her. But even if she doesn't get the sub, I think that there could be some control time down there. And, I'm leaning towards Karine Silva's way. I've been decently impressed with her. You take a look at some of the stats that she's put out there. Now, this is based off, 2 fights, I believe. So, these stats, they are what they are. She had the fight on Dana White's Contender Series where she kind of went into a war and she showed her toughness, and then the quick finish there on Poliana Botello. A 33% takedown accuracy rate. That's not that high. She's only attempted 3 of them. She landed 1. So it's really hard to judge her there, but I think that there's some potential for her to get this fight down to the mat. While she's landing not as many shots as she's been eating as well. But again, these numbers are skewed here. I don't really want to look too much into these. Not a lot of fight time to go off of basically that one fight there on Dana White's Contender Series, because the UFC fight ends very quickly. Give me Karine Silva here. I've liked what I've seen from her. And, also something to take note. Karine Silva, 29 years old, a little bit more of a prime fighter. Priscila, 34 now. She's been in some wars for sure. She's really taken some damage. I don't know. I could see her being bloodied up here if this fight goes to the deep waters. Karine also brings in a 2-inch reach advantage, even though she's 2 inches shorter. It's a little interesting there as well. And give me Karine Silva. Let's go take a look at the betting line here. Karine Silva right now, as high as a minus 200 favorite right now on some books, a 2-1 favorite. You'll probably be able to find her right around that minus 190 line. So people liking what they've seen from her in the limited amount of action that we've seen her in. I'm going to point towards that direction as well. I think that Karine comes in here and just gets the job done. Again, when we point back to that fight that she had in her UFC debut against Poliana Botello, you can see that her footwork and her timing was very, very good in that fight. And the thing that I liked about her in that fight as well is when she got this fight down to the mat, you could see the power that she possesses in her hands, right? When she was raining some ground and pound down on Poliana before she set up that sub, you could hear those shots smacking her up, man. You could hear the thud in those shots. I think that she possesses some serious power, or some solid power as well. And she's a little bit more technical. And I could see her landing some nasty ground and pound, potentially setting up that sub once again. Or in a variety of ways, she just takes this fight. So give me Karine Silva to win the fight. She's a cool chick as well. If you tag her in something, if you shoot her a message on Instagram, she'll be quick to respond back to you as well. She's a cool chick. Give me Karine. A matchup of 2 very promising young fighters in the featherweight division here. Francis Marshall taking on William Gomis. William, first and foremost, had a very successful UFC debut. That fight took place over in Paris, France. And I was decently impressed with his performance there against Jarno Irens. Now, you do take into consideration Jarno, a fighter not proven in the UFC at that point as well. He was making his UFC debut, a fighter that has the striking base behind him. Jarno had some success early on, but over time as that fight played out, we really got to see that William is a well-rounded fighter as well as just a dangerous striker. He outlanded Jarno at over a 2-to-1 ratio, but also snuck in 3 solid takedowns throughout that fight, 3 crucial takedowns. That really was the difference in that fight, if you guys remember. Now, this is a little bit of a different story, if you ask me. Francis Marshall, Francis is a fighter that comes into this fight with the wrestling background. And, you're talking a little bit of, the European type scene fighters when we were talking about Jarno and William Gomis. And now you're talking about these American, these young American up-and-coming fighters, which you guys know for the most part, a lot of these promising fighters have that wrestling pedigree, that wrestling background. Francis is one of those types of fighters. Now, what's cool about Francis is he's not just a lay and pray type of fighter, or not even just a fighter that really relies on his wrestling. He's willing to march forward and look to land that big shot on the feet, as we saw in his last fight when he went out there and got that big-time knockout, where he actually knocked out Marcelo Rojo, the tough Argentinian fighter. I believe he's from Argentina there, but got that knockout. But something that we got to talk about, when he got that knockout there, he actually was being outstruck in that fight. He was overall outstruck in that fight, but he was marching forward looking for that big shot, and he eventually landed it. I do believe that Francis needs to clean up his striking defense. I think that he is there to be hit. And that's something you have to worry a little bit about when you're taking a guy on like William Gomis. I think that he is a dangerous striker as well. We talked about the fact he's pretty well-rounded, but I do think that Francis is going to get the better of those grappling and wrestling exchanges. I feel decently confident that that's how the fight will play out. Could be wrong. I mean, we'll see if Gomis can prove us wrong there and show to be an even more well-rounded fighter than we think. But again, when you're looking at the Jarno fight, I think that Francis is just a little bit of a different type of fighter. The thing that I worry about for Francis is that maybe he gets a little bit too comfortable, willing to exchange on the feet, and he gets clipped or caught with the big shot there and dropped, and maybe he gets finished. I think there is potential for something like that to take place. Overall, though, I'm going to side with Francis Marshall. I hope that he plays this fight intelligently, relies on his wrestling and his grappling, and doesn't go out in this fight and look to just put on a show like he did in his last fight against Rojo, and instead shows to have a high fighter IQ. Because again, when you break down the tape on that Rojo fight, you could tell that he was feeling the crowd in that fight, and he was looking for the knockout, and that is what he got in that fight. But you guys know how the fight game is. It's a ruthless one. Sometimes that over-aggression can cost you. Now, we take a look at the betting line here on Bovada.lv. Francis Marshall, currently a -210 favorite over William at a +174. I'm a little bit interested in that line. I like Francis. I like everything that he's about. He's a tough kid, has that wrestling background, he'll have that wrestling edge here. But William has shown some promise as well, and I'm not really sure that there's not more value on that +174 line on William, if you ask me. I will pick Francis to get the job done. I'm not really crazy about the -210 line because William, he shows to be a promising fighter, and this will be a big test for him. But he passed that UFC debut with flying colors, and let's see how this fight plays out. I'll say that there's a little bit more value on that +174 line, if you ask me. Francis has to show me that he's fighting a little bit more intelligently and working on his striking defense before I'm going to back him at a -210 line here against the Frenchman. We got a big-time heavyweight showdown between Kamaru Usman's brother, Mohammed Usman, who just won the Ultimate Fighter, taking on Junior Tafa. Tafa also has a brother in the UFC, obviously, Justin Tafa. So Junior Tafa, the younger brother, a nasty striker, as is his brother. We just saw that in his last fight. Junior, a little bit more leaned out for the heavyweight division, and I think that Junior has a potentially promising career in the mixed martial arts world ahead of him. I enjoyed breaking down tape on him. A lot of experience. When you take a look at what he's been doing in the combat world, it's not just, he's been 4-0 since, coming over to the MMA scene. But this is a fighter that has an overwhelming amount of striking experience, pro boxing matches, pro Muay Thai fights, pro kickboxing matches, fighting in glory as well. A lot of big time knockouts, victories as well. He's been through some wars. He showed toughness. Definitely has a granite chin. I've been pretty impressed with the chin that he has shown so far. Obviously, they wear bigger gloves over there, but still just eating big shots, walking forward. And, Usman showed to have had some power, right, in his last fight where he went out there and got that big-time knockout in a fight where he was the underdog. If you guys remember that, right? He was the dog going in against, Zach Pyoga, which, remember now, Zach actually dropped down to the light heavyweight division after that loss there. Had a successful victory there against Jordan Wright. But Zach was an undersized heavyweight fighter, where I don't think that the same can be said against Junior here. Junior, a pretty solid framed fighter. But, I'm going to cut to the chase here. I think that this fight is most likely going to be taking place on the feet, where you definitely have to believe that Junior is going to be the way more polished striker and should get the better of Mohammed. Mohammed Usman, if anything, maybe he can use some wrestling to try to steal this fight, if you ask me. I mean, obviously his brother, a stud wrestler, we know that he's been working on his wrestling game, but he's not like Kamaru in the sense where he doesn't have a lengthy wrestling pedigree, right? I believe he was a football player. He's obviously an athlete. Mohammed's not a fighter, though, that has that wrestling background. Got into the MMA game late, so even though he's 34 years old, he's been working on his wrestling. Maybe there's an avenue for him to use that freakish athletic ability, maybe some of the wrestling skills that he's been learning over the past couple of years. Maybe he can burst through with the takedown or two on Junior and expose him there. But on the feet, we saw Mohammed being outstruck in that last fight against Zach Pyoga. I think that Junior definitely will be outstriking him as well and potentially setting up a knockout blow or something like that. So, this is a fun fight on paper. Junior will actually be about an inch or so taller. We don't have a reach for him here. Let's slide over real quick because I am curious about how these guys match up on the feet. If you guys don't mind here, Junior, he is. We said we don't got to reach for him over here as well. So sorry about that, but we know that Usman has that 79-inch reach there. He is a big, solid frame for the division. He's a real athlete, but I am going to be siding with Junior Tafa here. I like what the Tafa brothers are about. I think that they're sleeper fighters in the MMA world, if you ask me. I mean, they're fun fighters, and I hope that Junior has a successful UFC debut here, and we see more of him as we've seen from his brother, putting on those big time knockouts, getting the crowds going crazy. This is a straight pick'em fight right now on Bovada.lv, -110 to -110. So you pick your poison here. I'm picking Junior Tafa. I think that he impresses on the feet, but just keep in mind, there is potential for Usman to sneak in some takedowns, and obviously he showcases that he has power as well. These are small gloves we're talking about, right? These aren't these big glory gloves, you know, when you're breaking down tape on some of Junior's old fights. And keep in mind, we've seen some of these fighters come in from the kickboxing world, some of these fighters get knocked out by these MMA guys. They get a little bit too comfortable shelling up with the small gloves and these little 4-ounce gloves. When these strikes come right around the hands and they clip them on the side of the head and they put them out. So keep an eye on that as well. Hopefully Tafa doesn't get a little bit too comfortable with his guard. It's a different game in the MMA world, but overall I'll still side with Junior Tafa in a pick'em fight. One of the very rare women's featherweight matchups here as Rosa bumps up in weight to the featherweight division for the first time in her UFC career. Norma Dumont, we know that she has had the majority of her fights in the featherweight division. So, I mean, you could potentially say that she is already a little bit more of a proven featherweight fighter. I'm interested to see how Rosa's physique looks on the scales Friday. I want to see how she fills in for this featherweight division. And other than that, as far as their skill sets go, this is a very closely contested match, in my opinion. Both fighters have shown some skills. Rosa, a very well-rounded fighter. She has good striking, good takedown defense. She can sneak in some takedowns at crucial times within her fights as well. Norma Dumont, more than willing to exchange on the feet. She's a pretty polished striker there as well. I'm interested to see who gets the better of those striking exchanges. Although Karol is pretty good on the feet, she has been shown to eat some shots at times as well. Her defense lacking a little bit at times. In her last fight, taking on the old lady, Lena Landsberg, we saw Lena land some shots there in the feet. I thought that was a little surprising when we were watching that fight live. I thought that Karol would have looked a little better there. Now, at the end of the day, Karol still does get her hand raised, when it was all said and done. So she gets another W. And speaking of getting one's hand raised, Norma Dumont did well more than enough to get her hand raised in her last fight against Daniel Wolf. But I don't want you guys putting too much stock into that fight. Even though she looked really good there, Daniel Wolf is a fighter that really was not fit for that stage. We know that she has the boxing experience and she was trying to learn the sport of MMA. People were hoping that she would have came in with that boxing background, and she should have looked better on the feet. I mean, I don't want to undersell the fact that you would think that a fighter with Wolf's boxing background should be able to do something on the feet, and she really wasn't able to do that against Norma. But I would caution you not to put too much stock into that victory. I think that Daniel Wolf is just not set for a stage like that. And, Norma Dumont showed that. Before that, Norma did take an L against Macy Chase on a very closely contested match. Split decision loss there. I've been a little bit back and forth on who I was going to go with for this fight. I think that this is a fight that really should play out closely. But I like the experience that Karol has. And something tells me that she rises to the occasion here, not cutting the weight. Maybe she looks good in this division. Like I said, she's a well-rounded fighter. Maybe she could sneak in a takedown. I don't know. Not positive about that, but she mixes things together pretty well. The thing that I worry about a little bit is that sometimes Karol's a little bit of a slow starter, and sometimes she's a little slow with her striking defense. Maybe Norma lands on her a little bit early on, but I could see Karol starting to catch her rhythm and starting to catch her groove as she starts to move through this fight, and I think that she could potentially edge this fight. It's a close one. Let's go take a look at the betting line and see what we're talking about for this fight here. Rosa, a -105 with the comeback on Norma Dumont at -117. So a slight favor towards Norma's way. I think that this is a very close fight. I really wouldn't bank on either fighter, but I'm going to side with Karol here. When Karol does show up and she's mentally there, like I said, she strings in her entire attack pretty well. She'll set up her takedowns pretty well with her striking and just mix things up properly. And Norma, not a lot of pro experience. I want to see a little bit more from her against legit fighters. I know she has a couple victories against some legitimate fighters, but I want to see more from her there. And I guess potentially you could say the same thing for Karol as well. Karol's record pretty padded leading up to the UFC, but let's see how this fight plays out. I will side with Karol bumping up in weight. My dog, Christos Giagos, the Spartan, throwing down with the Gladiator, Ricky Glenn. Excellent matchmaking here. Both these fighters always bring it. This has all the makings to be a war. Christos Giagos, coming off 2 losses, but when you take into consideration the level of talent that he's been battling against, maybe take it a little bit easy on him. He is coming off losses to Arman Sarukian and Thiago Moises, 2 fighters that are really thriving in this division. Before that, victories over Sean Seriano and Carlton Manus, 2 very low-level fighters. So it's really hard to get a gauge on him, if you ask me. I mean, Giagos is a fighter that's well-rounded. He has some wrestling skills. We know that he made the move down to South Florida. He's been training over at Team Killcliff FC with Henry Hooft and all them. And I expect that we see the best version of him going into this fight based on the fact that he was just in there with premier talent. He's hungrier than ever. His back is up against the wall. And I really believe that. Now, Ricky Glenn is absolutely no pushover. Ricky Glenn, a fighter that has really gone under the radar for years. He's been putting in work back in the World Series of Fighting days. He used to put in a lot of work over there. Since coming into the UFC, he hasn't been extremely active, but when he's in there, he brings his lunchbox. I mean, if you think about his fight that he had against Gavin Tucker, probably took a couple of years off Gavin Tucker's life, if you guys remember that fight. Unfortunately, Tucker was not knocked out and was able to hang on and just be brutalized for 15 minutes. I don't know why his corner didn't throw the towel in, but they didn't. And Ricky Glenn showed that he has an amazing gas tank and he will literally just go nonstop. When you crunch the numbers here, Ricky Glenn has been a little bit more productive offensively throughout his career. His takedown defense has actually checked off as well, a 68% takedown defensive rate. I think that can cause some issues for Giagos. I really believe that Giagos will have to work in his wrestling in this fight. He has good power as well, and I could see these guys going back and forth on the feet. Maybe Giagos can clip him with the shot, but Ricky has a chin, and I think that Giagos' path to victory here is going to be mixing in the wrestling with the striking. I really do believe that. Giagos is lacking a little bit with the striking defense at times, and I don't want to see him settle into just a straight kickboxing match. I want to see him keep Ricky on his heels and secure some takedowns. He has a little bit of a wrestling background, and I think that will be the key to victory for Christos Giagos. This is a tough test for him. Like I said, might be a little bit biased with my pick on Christos Giagos here, being the fact that I've chatted up with him and I've kept in touch with him a little bit on Instagram, and I know that he's waiting to see that I got his head squared off when I make my Instagram post. But I really do believe that the value is on Christos Giagos, as he is the underdog in this fight. We'll take a look at the betting line here. Christos Giagos, currently a plus 147 dog. I think that the value is on Christos. I'm going to pick him here, but just understand that Ricky Glenn is a tough stylistic matchup. And we really haven't seen Christos get over the hump and have that big victory in the UFC. This will be his opportunity here to have a legitimate name under his belt. And I think that there's a real possibility for it, but just understand that Ricky Glenn is absolutely no slouch. And maybe it's a little bit more likely we see Ricky Glenn get the job done, but I'm going to go with the dog in this fight. Like I said, I got a little bit of a connection with my Greek brother there. So just be careful if you're betting on this fight. But if you're getting decent dog odds on Christos, I think that you're not going wrong, but maybe just sit back and see how this fight goes. I don't know. You guys catch my drift there. An absolute welterweight clash here. Jeremiah Wells taking on Matthew Semelsberger. First and foremost, Jeremiah Wells, since making his short notice UFC debut against Warley Alves and starching him, going out there, taking the path of least resistance against Blood Diamond, submitting him. And then in his last fight, in his most recent fight, he goes out there and knocks out Court McGee. He has shown to be an absolute finisher. I believe he may be a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt as well, to go along with the dangerous striking he possesses. We've heard Paul Felder talk about the stories of him in the gym. He's a warrior. and not a lot of pro experience. Kind of starts his career a little bit later. And I think that right now is the time for Jeremiah Wells. He needs to be on the fast track towards the top of this division. Matthew Semelsberger, coming off the victory that he just had against Jake Matthews, that would be a pretty solid name to take out, because that victory over Jake Matthews carries some serious weight, in my opinion. Matthews was absolutely surging, and he goes in there, and the version that we just seen of Semelsberger was very impressive. Now, the fight that he had before that against Alex Morono, not so much so. So it's kind of hard to gauge which Semelsberger we're going to get. I'm going to side more so with the most recent version of himself, being that I think that he's a fighter that's still getting better and better each fight. Just 15 pro fights. He's 30 years old. I just think that he's going to get better and better each time around, and I think that he's going to really branch off that last victory and continue that momentum here. But the test that's in front of him is just an absolute dangerous one. And in Jeremiah Wells, I'm going to say that if these guys are going to strike it out, Matthew Semelsberger is there to be hit, and Jeremiah Wells is a guy that you do not want teeing off on you. Jeremiah Wells landing 3.68 significant strikes per minute while only absorbing 1.62. He's been pretty defensively sound as well. 100% takedown defense rate. I just not feeling too confident that Semelsberger solidifies those takedowns. Jeremiah Wells, not really much of a wrestling threat. We saw what he did against Blood Diamond, but Blood Diamond very much lacking in that department, and still even really kind of had to work for that in the beginning of that fight. And I think that Semelsberger can put up a fight there and kind of stifle that avenue. But as they strike it out, I'm just going to side with I'm going to side with Wells here. I love the power that he possesses, and I just think that it's going to pay dividends in this fight. I think that the power shots will pay dividends in this fight. Now, I do not pick Wells with an overwhelming amount of confidence, again, just based on the fact that we saw the strides of growth in Semelsberger's game from the Morono fight into that Matthews fight. So you do have to be a little wary that you got to be a little wary of the possibility that Semelsberger continues that momentum and that growth into this fight, and we really start to see a dangerous version of himself. I think there is that possibility, but I will side with Jeremiah Wells. Let's take a look at the betting line here. Jeremiah Wells is a -112. The comeback at -110 for Semelsberger. This is essentially a pick'em fight, about as small of a lean as you could possibly have on Wells there. It's a pick'em fight. I will side with Jeremiah Wells just based on the fact that he carries that power. He just continues to get the job done. We haven't seen that lackluster performance like we've seen from Semelsberger when he faced off with Morono. Wells has just been nonstop action. I like the power. And again, people sleep on his ground game as well. Supposedly that there's some wrinkles in his game there that people don't really know about. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and he could probably hold his own. But at the end of the day, I think this fight takes place on the feet, where I think that power comes into play. Iasmin Lucindo taking on Brogan Walker. Again, you got to love that name, Brogan. I just picture her coming out the womb, and Pop's like, we're naming her Brogan, bro. And she lived up to the name, right? I mean, she's an MMA fighter. She's got the whole Brogan energy going with her, but she didn't really bring in that Brogan energy into that Ultimate Fighter finale, where she got finished by the not so impressive Juliana Miller. I don't know. Juliana Miller wasn't looking that good in her last fight. I don't want to completely turn my back on Miller there. I mean, we know Miller does have some good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills, but she looked sloppy in that fight, and that loss that Brogan took to her, where she was finished, looks that much worse right now. Well, on the other hand, Iasmin Lucindo, she lost her UFC debut, but she's 21 years old. And when you think about the fighter that she lost to, and Iasmin Juregi, we know that Iasmin is very talented. She's a very talented up-and-coming prospect fighting out of Mexico. And that was a high-caliber fight. That's what I took from that fight when I was watching it. I think that they were two young fighters that have very promising careers to come. So Lucindo doesn't get the job done there, but she still shows to be a promising fighter. That's how I'm looking at it. And I think that Lucindo, you have to be favoring Lucindo to get the job done here against Brogan Walker. Brogan Walker, her takedown defense is below average. I think Lucindo could potentially take her down and use some jiu-jitsu. Lucindo is a dangerous striker as well. She's a technical striker. I think that she gets the better of the striking exchanges. I just like Lucindo here. She's 21 years old. We're going to see more growth from her game. She's going to continue to look better and better. While on the other hand, Brogan Walker, 33 years old, she went through the Ultimate Fighter. She has 10 pro fights at this point in time. Well, Lucindo already has 18 pro fights and just a younger, more fresh body. And yeah, all this points me just to jump to the fact that I'm going to pick Lucindo to win this fight. Let's take a look at the betting line and see what we're talking about here. Lucindo, a minus 350 favorite. She's a pretty hefty favorite. Can Brogan Walker try to mix it up and steal a close split decision? I mean, women's MMA, sometimes you guys, you want to stay away from it. I hear a lot of people wary about touching women's MMA and some of these high favorites as of recently. I know that there's been some fights that have stood out as of recently, but I don't know. I would say overall, it's not as bad as some of you guys think it is. A lot of times when you see the more polished fighter coming in, they'll go out there and handle business like I think Lucindo will do here. So, does Lucindo get a finish? That's something that maybe you want to keep an eye on. I think that Lucindo is live to potentially to maybe get another finish, as we just saw Miller get that KO there against her. Maybe she rocks her and maybe submits her after she hurts her too. Maybe we see a finish. Maybe you look for the under or just a straight up finish for Lucindo here in this matchup. In the lightweight division, two big personalities. We got Bobby Green facing off with Jared Gordon. Everybody knows that Jared Gordon is coming in very hungry after he was absolutely robbed against Paddy Pimblett. And Bobby Green's coming off a fight where he was knocked unconscious against Drew Dober while he was going into that fight with a lot of momentum. Recently being on the Joe Rogan Experience, stepping in on short notice against Islam Makhachev, showing to be a team player, having some big knockouts as of recently. Just his boxing's really been working for him in the cage, and a lot of people are gravitating towards his personality. He's a solid fighter. I get it, but maybe a little bit overvalued and overhyped going into this fight, if you ask me. Well, Jared Gordon is a fighter that's kind of consistently undervalued, right? I mean, just kind of has that meat and potatoes type of style. He pushes the pace with his wrestling, has underrated power. He's a guy that continuously gets his hand raised, and maybe a guy that's just a little bit undervalued at times against a guy that's maybe overvalued. Now, both guys got one thing similar going into this fight, one thing in common. They both got the head tattoos. Now, you're not supposed to know about Jared Gordon's head tattoo. It's supposed to kind of look like hair. Bobby Green's is blatantly a head tattoo, so a little bit different there. But on a serious note, two warriors. And again, we talked about the Paddy loss. Now, remember, Jared Gordon was landing some big shots in that fight. I think that he has underrated boxing as well, underrated power. And Bobby Green's coming off a knockout loss. So you got to really wonder where his brain is and where he's at physically. Is his body ready to take another big shot on the feet like that? We know Bobby Green keeps his hands very low and he's there to be hit. That could be a little bit of a problem if you ask me. Jared Gordon landing 5.37 significant strikes per minute. He does put a lot of volume out there. He can take a shot. For the most part, he has a solid chin. We've seen him put out before, but I would say he has a pretty solid chin. If you ask me, I think he's going to be able to eat some of those shots from Bobby Green. Now, if this fight goes to a decision, the volume is probably going to be on Bobby Green's side. I would say so. Bobby Green putting out 5.99 significant strikes per minute. He really puts a high volume with the strikes, throws kicks out there. He mixes everything up pretty well. Showing to have had a 73% takedown defensive rate. It's pretty high. But you know what? I wouldn't be shocked if Jared Gordon sneaks in a takedown here and there throughout this fight. He has that wrestling background. He pushes the pace. And I would edge Jared Gordon as far as the wrestling goes. But the biggest X factor in this fight for me is going to be the fact that Bobby Green's coming off that brutal knockout loss, while Jared Gordon really just took out Paddy Pimblett, and he's coming in very hungry after he got robbed. And I think that all these things kind of point towards Jared Gordon's way, actually, if you ask me. I know a lot of people are on Bobby Green here, and I know that Bobby Green's going to be a big favorite. We're going to get to the betting line in a minute. But I like Jared Gordon here. I like Jared in this spot. Let's go take a look at the betting line. We'll pull up bovada.lv. Well, you will see Jared Gordon is going to be a pretty hefty underdog as he settles in right now as a plus 212 underdog. The comeback on Bobby Green at minus 265. I just don't understand how you guys are feeling so confident in taking Bobby Green around that type of line. Coming off that knockout loss there, he was just dominated by Islam Makhachev. I understand that Islam's built a little bit differently, but the way that he was dominated in that fight, I mean, can Jared Gordon use some of his wrestling abilities to solidify a round or two with here or there? There's a lot of question marks going into this fight for Bobby Green, if you ask me, and I don't feel comfortable throwing a minus 265 tag out there. So if you guys do, that's on you. I mean, we'll see how this fight plays out. Maybe Bobby just pieces him up, and I look dumb for taking a stab here on Jared Gordon. I think the value is more so on Jared Gordon, and I'm going to be picking Jared Gordon to win this fight. How about that? Jared Gordon, 34 years old. Bobby Green's 36 years old. He's up there in age, coming off that knockout loss. Bobby will have a 3-inch reach advantage, but Gordon knows how to close the distance and go to work. And give me Jared Gordon to get the job done here. I'm taking a little bit of a hefty dog here on the card in Gordon. A tough middleweight matchup here between the longtime UFC fighter and Brad Tavares, coming off the Ultimate Fighter years ago, taking on Bruno Silva, a fighter that's really bursted on the scene as of recently, but coming off a very disappointing performance against Gerald Meerschaert, where he showed to be a little bit of an odd version of himself in that fight. And I think he brings in some question marks against a warrior like Brad Tavares here. Bruno Silva really handling business since bursting on the scene in the UFC, taking out guys like Turman, Andrew Sanchez, Jordan Wright, went to war with Alex Pereira, but might have left a little bit of himself in the cage that day. I'm not sure. I don't know. He took some big shots from Pereira. And then the performance, again, we talked about against Meerschaert, where he was eventually submitted, but outstruck 2-1 in that fight. And again, now he comes in, he faces a guy in Brad Tavares, who's very technically sound. He's a very well-rounded fighter. Tavares carries some pretty good power, throws some nice heavy leg kicks. He can grapple, could do a little bit of it all. I think that this fight does have the potential to play out very closely. There's a lot of similarities between both these fighters. I could see them kind of going to war and this being kind of a tit-for-tat type of fight. Both men bring in a 74-inch reach. Both men almost the same height. Brad Tavares an inch taller. Both towards their mid-30s here. I mean, just two warriors that are going to throw down. And, something's been kind of leaning me towards Brad Tavares' way for whatever reason, because I've been very high on Bruno Silva throughout his career. I think it's obviously just that performance he had against Gerald Meerschaert. A little bit of a recent biasy, maybe a little bit when I'm making my decision here, but I just wasn't crazy about the way that he looked. If he does show up and looked to be the more early version of himself in the UFC, I mean, he definitely has the ability to go out here and stifle Tavares. Tavares has kind of not really lived up to his momentum at times throughout his career. That's kind of been a reoccurring theme throughout his career as well. And I wouldn't be shocked if he drops the ball, but it's just something tells me Tavares shows up here. I don't know what it is. Tavares always showcasing solid takedown defense, 81% takedown defense rate. We've always known that about him. But I want to talk about the striking here. Brad Tavares putting off 3.3 significant strikes per minute, while absorbing about 3 flat. Bruno Silva, on the other hand, landing 4.31, so putting out more volume. We talked about some of those wars that he's been in, but also absorbing more shots than he's giving out at 4.58. And that's been a little bit of a theme throughout his career, right? He has taken damage. He's willing to give damage, willing to put damage out and take it at the same time. And I don't know. I think that's going to favor Tavares here. I think Tavares will outvolume him a little bit more so. Tavares might be a little bit more technically sound, but Bruno Silva also has that KO power. This is going to be a fun fight, but I think that this fight will be a little bit of a kickboxing war, a little bit of a striking matchup here. And I'm going to say that Tavares lands some nice leg kicks, mixes things up well with his boxing, and edges a decision, maybe a split decision as well. But I will go towards Brad Tavares' way. Let's take a look at the betting line here and let's see what we're talking about. Brad Tavares is going to be, I believe he's going to be a slight favorite here. Now even as high as a minus 175, so maybe some movement there as well. He's now a minus 175 favorite over Bruno Silva. I'm going to say that there's potentially more value on Bruno Silva at plus 145. That line should be a little bit closer in my opinion, but I do like Brad Tavares to get the job done there. Absolute fire bantamweight matchup here, a top 10 bantamweight matchup between Song Yadong and Ricky Simone. Song Yadong, Yadong Song, however you want to sing that song. We know that he is a true athlete. He's lightning fast, very technically sound. It was interesting hearing Corey Sandhagen talk about his matchup with Song on the Joe Rogan Experience recently, and he talked about how he's never been in the cage with somebody that's moved as fast as him. And you see it, right? When you break down tape and when you watch his fights, I mean, he moves a little bit differently than what you're used to seeing when you're watching a fight. But if you ask me, he kind of slows down and he kind of loses a little bit of something as the fights go on. We'll talk about some of the bigger losses that he's had and how they kind of played out towards the end of those fights. We'll actually do that now. When you think about what he's been doing in the UFC, right? First and foremost, I thought that he lost that Chito Vera fight. He was held against the cage a little bit, and you saw him lose a little bit of that quick twitchness that he has as Chito pressed him against the cage. It was a very close fight. The vast majority thought Vera won that fight, if you guys remember. Drops a fight against Kyler Phillips, where Phillips thrived late in that fight, landed some big shots. Big victories over Casey Kenny and Julio Arce had the knockout victory there. The Marlon Moraes knockout, everyone's knocking Moraes out though. And then the Sandhagen loss, where I thought that he did slow down a little bit towards the end of that fight. I believe that fight ended in the 4th round. The cut, obviously ending the fight there, but I don't think that Song looked to be the same fighter that he was early on. And I think that Ricky Simone stylistically is a really bad matchup for Song, because he just has that nonstop pressure and pushes with the wrestling. And I think that he'll really drain the arms and the legs of Song with the constant takedown attempts. And I think that that quick twitch ability that Song has won't really look the same as the fight progresses. Now, it is just a 3-round fight. It's not a 5-round fight. So, maybe I'm overselling that, but on that same token, Ricky can really sprint from the very beginning. It's a 15-minute fight. He doesn't have to pace himself either, so take that into consideration. Ricky has been looking like an absolute beast as of recently. Goes in there, dominates and submits Jack Shore. Knocks out Rafael Sansao before that. Defeats my old arch nemesis Brian Kelleher before that. Victory over Perello before that. What else we got? The victory over Ray Borg. And then his last loss was against Rob Font. That was a while back in 2019. So Ricky Simone doing his thing here. Now I want to make a comparison with this fight, and it's interesting too, right? Because it's the same weight class. But this fight reminds me a little bit of a fight that we just saw, and I think it's going to play out similarly to that. And that was the fight between Merab and Petr Yan, right? When Merab just was using the wrestling, just pushing the pace. I had this gut feeling that Ricky Simone is going to use similar tactics to what we saw from Merab. He's a similar type of fighter, and as is Song Yadong, is similar to Petr Yan in a lot of ways. A very technical striker, quick on the feet. And I have a feeling that the fight is going to play out similarly to that. And that's just my gut feeling there, and that's why I'm kind of edging Ricky here. I think Ricky's going to really smother Song here. I think he's going to really push the pace, push him up against the cage, and I think Song will have his moments as well, but I'm going to side with the 20-3 professional resume of Ricky Simone. He's been really putting in work. Song Yadong, 19-7, 1-1. He's had some blemishes as well throughout his career. He's putting it together. He's still very young, 25 years old. He has a lot of promise moving forward. But Ricky right now, he's been impressing me, and I think he takes the momentum from his last fight against Jack Shore, pushes it into this fight, and the wrestling, the pace, and the grappling is going to be the difference here. That's what I'm feeling. Let's take a look at the betting line. Ricky Simone, a -140 compared to the comeback on Song Yadong at +115. I initially was thinking that there's a little bit more value in that +115 line. I thought this should be more of a pick'em. The more I was breaking down tape and just seeing how good Ricky looked in that last fight, and looking how good he is going into this fight right here, looks to be in prime physical shape. I just think that he implements that tactic that we talked about by closing the distance. And I think the -140 line is actually not that bad of a line. I'll side with the -140 line on Ricky here. Hey, you guys, as I stated in the beginning of this video, if you sign up to Bovada.lv through my referral link right now, I'm going to give you an entire month for free. That's a $100 value. You're going to get 4 fight cards for my official plays, my free picks for 4 fight cards. You guys can actually use those 4 cards for anyone you guys want. All right. That's a special offer. I probably won't be running that again. Just let you guys know that right now, but I'm going to put that out there for you guys right now. And if you sign up, you'll also get an added bonus to your Bovada.lv account. And Bovada.lv, in my opinion, is the best sportsbook out there. So if you guys are interested, reach out to me. All right, guys, we got the big main event heavyweight showdown. You guys know what time it is. We got the striker versus the grappler. It's Sergei Pavlovich versus Curtis Blaydes. But I'll tell you what, Curtis Blaydes has really been working on his striking. And this is the heavyweight division we're talking about. It only takes one big shot or one injury, like we saw against Aspinall and Curtis Blaydes' last fight. And Curtis Blaydes is in this fight 100% on the feet. On that same token, I would say it's very unlikely that we see Sergei Pavlovich go in this fight and have success in the wrestling department. All right. So I want you guys to take that into consideration when you analyze this matchup here. That being said, I'm going to say that the striking that we've seen from Sergei Pavlovich as of recently has been some of the most technical yet disastrous and brutal striking that we've ever seen in the division. I mean, what he went out there and just did to Tai Tuivasa, I saw that fight live. It was ridiculous. What he just went out there and did to Derek Lewis. Not many men go out there and just drop Lewis like that or hurt Lewis like that on the feet. If you're really analyzing his boxing skills, you understand that they're very technical. It's not that he's just this mammoth of a man that has crazy power. His boxing skills are very, very technical. How about this? 0% takedown accuracy, just 2 takedowns attempted. We talked about the potential grappling of his, but we're not worried about that. We're talking about 8 significant strikes landed, 8.067 significant strikes landed per minute. That's the type of volume he's putting out there. But you have to understand that his fights are not lasting very long. He's going out there and he's putting these guys out in the first round. That's a major question mark. What happens if he doesn't get that first round finish? What happens if he doesn't get that first or second round knockout victory over Curtis Blaydes? Then, how is he going to look in the later rounds with Curtis Blaydes pushing the pace? We know he has a good gas tank. We know he has the wrestling ability. That's really the question mark, if you ask me. Curtis Blaydes with a 54% takedown accuracy rate throughout his UFC career. Not really stellar numbers when you think about it, if you want to be honest. I don't think I think that number could be a little bit better. It's a solid number. But if he struggles to get this fight down to the mat and, gets tagged up by Pavlovich as he looks to make those entries and Pavlovich makes him pay there, that could be a problem for him there. I'm going to cut to the chase here. I just think that the striking of Sergei Pavlovich has been so nasty, and Curtis Blaydes has been a fighter that we've seen landed on throughout his career. Maybe not consistently, but we've seen Derek Lewis land that giant uppercut on him. We've seen him tagged up by Francis Ngannou and swollen up and landed on. And I have this gut feeling that Sergei Pavlovich is going to implement similar tactics there, just landing those big shots. And I'm going to say he actually gets that first round knockout. How about that? I'm going to say that Pavlovich goes out here and does what he's been doing as of recently and just going out there, starching the opposition. I've been very impressed with him. He obviously has to show us more with the takedown defense and the wrestling and the grappling, but he's not a small guy either. This isn't a guy that you're going to go out there and just push over. I think that he's going to be a problem just to get down. He has a 4-inch reach advantage, and if Curtis Blaydes just shoots sloppily or just tries to close the distance in a sloppy manner, I think Pavlovich is going to make him pay even worse. Well, I shouldn't say that. I'm going to say even worse than what Derek Lewis did to him, but it doesn't get much worse than that. Maybe up to par or around that same atmosphere of what Derek Lewis did to Curtis Blaydes. I think that he has the potential to do that as well. And obviously that knockout that Curtis Blaydes took not too long ago, or within the last couple of years against Lewis, you understand that the brain can be shut off, and it has been shut off, and Pavlovich will look to test that. I'm going to side with the Russian here, who's 17-1. His lone loss by way of Alistair Overeem. He was a little outmatched at that point in time. He was young, and, if you want to take a look at that, when he took that loss against Alistair Overeem, that was back in 2018, 5 years ago. He was 25 years old. When you understand how young he was and how green he was, he's a much different fighter right now. This is going to be a hell of a fight. I can't wait to see how this fight takes place. But my gut tells me Sergei Pavlovich lands those big shots on Blaydes, and I cannot wait to see how this fight takes place. Who do you guys got in this main event? Now, with that being said, let's go take a look at the betting line where Pavlovich is a plus 140 dog. Curtis Blaydes, the minus 170 favorite. People like the fact that he has that wrestling in his back pocket. We haven't seen Pavlovich go past the first round. I'm sorry, man, but I'm going with my gut here. I think there's more value in the dog, and I think Pavlovich gets it done. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up Pavlovich versus Blaydes. I'm really excited for this heavyweight showdown. Obviously, you guys can probably tell. I just think that this fight has all the makings to be fireworks. You guys know how it is with the heavyweight division, but when you're talking about premier heavyweights, it's awesome, especially when you're talking about guys that bring in the credentials and the abilities that these guys have. So, you guys understand that. Just want to throw this out there real quick. My computer was giving me a couple issues as I was recording this, so if you notice that the video was a little bit different than most, I wasn't able to have the videos going in the background. I got to clean some things up here behind the scenes. Might have to get a new computer and really fix some things up here. Like I said, I had a long road trip. I just came back into town as of recently, and a little bit of a scattered weekend. So don't hold me to the fire with this video. I want to give you guys a bit of product next week. I appreciate you guys hanging strong with me. And if you guys are wondering why maybe this wasn't up to par, I don't know why I feel like this wasn't up to par with some of my other videos. I wasn't liking what was going on here. Some of my equipment was kind of frustrating me, but I'm going to have this all cleaned up, and I promise you guys for next week's video. And in fact, for our free play video, things will be clean, crisp, and sharp coming to you guys. All right. So I'll leave you guys with that message, man. Just push through, grind through. You guys know what time it is. I appreciate all you guys. Signing out. Teller.
Welcome to the show. This the MMA fortune teller. Yeah.
The MMA fortune teller.
The teller.